Good morning. I'm not really sure what to make of this. I don't know if what I'm saying is meaningful or not, so just bear with me while I get it out there, and then you can hit me up in the replies and wherever you might happen to hear or see this, and let me know if you think there's something there, or maybe there isn't. It's been percolating on my mind for a while. There was a post I saw on Facebook, one of the D&D or DM groups. I want to say the title was something about, I don't know, let me know which rules in 5th edition you find are janky or something weird like that. Or let me know the worst mechanics in 5th edition, something like that. I don't really know why I clicked in it. I don't really find myself compelled by reading about 5th edition discussions so much because I'm not playing the game right now. So the whatever the jankiest rule is in 5th edition doesn't bother me one way or another. It doesn't do anything. And I'm not on the, let's pile on the 5th edition kind of thing. And this is not what this is either. But in any case, I ended up in that thread, and somebody posted this, we'll call it a scenario, which was essentially you have a gelatinous cube in 5th edition. Gelatinous cube, classic D&D creature, we all know what it is. The gelatinous cube has an engulf attack. To do the engulf, it has to move. That's part of the attack. It moves, and then by moving, it moves into the square that somebody occupies and engulfs them, right? Easy peasy. Somebody figured out, it's got to move to engulf me. So if I can stop it from moving, it can't engulf me. Perfectly fine, sound logic. And one can imagine, well, can I freeze it? Can I put some kind of obstruction between itself and me? Something to force it not to move. Perfect. Well, the conclusion that I guess someone came up with to if it has to move to engulf me, therefore I don't want it to move, therefore what can I do? Their solution was, I'm going to grapple it. Because if I grapple it, it becomes restrained, I think. I'm not sure. I know there are several levels of conditions attached to, potentially to a grapple. So I don't want to get bogged down in that. I don't remember, but essentially they're immobilized. If I grapple it, it's immobilized, therefore it can't engulf me. And what followed was a whole discussion about this particular technique and how different people have addressed it. I make a house rule, I make an exception, this is just a silly rule, all this and that. But what I felt was interesting to me, the most interesting about this was that there was a complete lack of discussion around the context, around the fiction, which is, to me, how does one grapple a gelatinous cube? It's jelly. You put your hands up against it and push. I imagine your hands just go in. In fact, that's what it wants. Its engulf features, just it moving into you and just sliding over you. So how do you grapple that? Where's the context? Where in the fiction have you set up how they're grappling? That didn't come up in the discussion, and it made me think. And I don't want to say that, these couple of people on Facebook represent the entire community at large. This is where I get into, I don't know if this is a thing or not. But part of me thought, well, maybe this is a meaningful difference between how people approach OSR gaming and modern RPG gaming, something like 5th edition, is that you're looking in 5th edition, in this discussion, this is mechanics first. The fiction is what it is, but essentially you're just going down the mechanics. Presumably, someone would say to their GM, if their GM said, it's a gelatinous cube, how do you grapple it? This player might retort, does it say that I can't? In the stat block, does it say something about non-grappleable? And the GM might look at the stat block and say, no. And then the player might go, well, there it is. It becomes potentially, and I know I'm sure I'm creating kind of a straw man here, but it potentially becomes a mechanics question. What have we put in the mechanics? Mechanics versus mechanics, and then the fiction is kind of that afterthought. Okay, well, we've done all this stuff. What it looks like, I don't know, but here's the mechanics, right? We're following the mechanics first. The mechanics are up front. And this is not a new thing in some ways. A lot of the discussions in our 5th edition are these mechanical things, how these different cogs in the wheels, how they all connect. I use my reaction and the action and this and that, and how we pile them all together, and we click together and that together, we make these whole chains of events. But at some point, and I would say this would be an illustration of that point. Is it going too far? In my mind, I would say it has gone too far. If we're looking at, we don't care what the fiction is. We aren't even curious as to how does this look like in the fiction first before we engage in the mechanics. It seemed to have just been taken as an acceptable point that a fighter or whoever was trying to do this grappling here could just grapple it. That wasn't even a question. And I don't know why that wasn't a question, because that was my first question. Is that sounds awesome. Tell me how you do it. Because in my game, I'm not going to let you roll, whether it's to grapple or do anything else, if you can't explain to me in the fiction, in the context, how you are actually doing what you say you're doing. It's not enough just to say, well, I have +10 to grappling, therefore I grapple the cube. Okay, but this cube is made of living jelly, and you're basically doing it a favor. Its whole attack is just pushing into you. So you're pushing it, it's just gonna let you in, or just force itself over. You are in its essence doing its job for it. So you need to explain how you were preventing it. What was that old trick you could do with, there's some trick with water. You could put some kind of powder, some kind of chemical. Someone can tell me what it was. It wasn't salt, but it was, I don't remember exactly what it was, but you could essentially coat water with this powder, and that would make it so that you wouldn't break the surface tension, or make the surface tension much more difficult to break. And so you could do kind of fun things like kind of putting your hand in the water and the surface tension would bend rather than break, because it's been strengthened by this, whatever the chemical reaction with this powder. I'm only remembering it vaguely, but I'm thinking in the fiction, is it something like that? Do you have something? Is your wizard going to use some kind of cone of cold and say, okay, that freezes the face of the cube, and then you can put your hands on there, and for that time that it's frozen, you can hold it back. Though given freezing it would probably prevent it from moving and engulfing anyway, but whatever. Or you've got a giant board, something that I don't know, for whatever reason the cube can't get around. I don't know what it would be, but that's what I want to hear first. Not here, let's do the mechanical rigmarole and then figure out how the fiction works. I don't know. It was weird to me, or I thought maybe it was illuminating, not even necessarily to the 5th edition rules, but the mindset that we're looking at the mechanics first. And I don't necessarily always disagree with it. There are some cases in which I think that to be interesting, they will put in fluff that doesn't match the mechanics of a spell, for example. Or they'll say something about a certain class or a class option. But when you look at it mechanically, that doesn't really match up with what they're saying in the fiction. So I understand at those points where you might be looking at it and saying, well, this is one way the spell could work, but mechanically the spell does this. If you want to say, hey, fire fills up the area, and then you want to, in the fiction, it could be an explosion or it could be something else, but the mechanics of the spell don't support everything that an explosion supports. It's limited into an area. It doesn't have that kind of bursting outward effect. However you want to figure out the fiction, I get that. And I get it in terms of classes. Okay, the class says, oh, paladins can do this, but the actual mechanically paladins don't quite work like that. I can see where what they're trying to say in the fluff is kind of, this is how it could be. This is one version of it that you can take, but you can feel free to change it up however you like. Here's kind of how mechanically it works. So you can see how those mechanics fit within this version of the fiction or in that one. So that's one thing. But once we get into the game, kind of part of the whole role-playing game deal to me is the fiction comes first, and then you respond to that by trying to interface with the fiction. And when that interface, or when the methods of your interface require chance and skills and the things that are supposed for your character but aren't a given, you figure out which mechanics, you figure out which skills are coming into play, and you figure out the obstacle, how hard it is, and you roll some dice. In this case, certainly there is a fiction that precedes the mechanics. A gelatinous cube is here. It exists in the fiction. But after that, it seems that's implied by this whole spiel, this whole thing, is that the mechanics come first. We're not thinking in common sense first about what is a gelatinous cube. Therefore, it's kind of impossible to grapple in the normal sense, unless you have some kind of exception, because of the nature of gelatinous cube. Do I, as a creator, or as a GM, or do I need to write down all the things you can't do to a gelatinous cube? Otherwise, you're going to do it. Do I need to do that? Or can I just look at it and say, it's a gelatinous cube? It's an ooze. You simply can't grapple the ooze. This seemed to suggest, this discussion, that you could, presumably, because nothing mechanically says you can't. And in some way, that to me is a backwards way of doing it. And it's certainly, I think, a way that is different on a fundamental level than at least how I address things in OSR gaming, or at least how I play and when I play OSR games. What do you think? Let me know. I thought it was interesting. I didn't get into the discussion, so I didn't ask any questions about, well, how are they grappling the cube? Frankly, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to get in there and say, well, how are they doing it? And just get some it doesn't say that they can't kind of discussion. I didn't want to ruin my day by getting that discussion, but I didn't. But I would like to hear from you. You guys, let me know. Let me know in the chat. Leave me a voicemail. I have a link to the voicemail in the show notes. Let me know what you think of this whole thing. Am I simply making a mountain out of a molehill? Am I taking some kind of edge case and applying it too broadly? Am I just taking some dudes and folk on the internet and unfortunately are in a poor way expanding them out to represent the D&D community, which they don't? I am open, ready, and willing to admit that could certainly be the case. Let me know what your experiences are. Let me know your thoughts. That's all I got for today. Have a great rest of your day, night, weekend, whenever you're watching, listening to this. Game on. Talk to you later.